I had this idea when I was in college that I wanted to start a nonprofit that was was called World Peace is Possible, and the the main idea was exactly that, just asserting an idea, um, in a sense, makes it true. That to believe that there is no way for people to solve the problems that cause majority of conflict and suffering in the world, just believing that that is a fact that cannot be changed is what mainly prevents progress. Whereas even having a small number of people believing that world peace is possible creates a culture that then uh, you know makes it happen. And so, and it's not to say that there will not be, that there'll be no suffering or no problems, but but really, um, it's almost like, like I've heard Elon say, the definition of sustainable compared to unsustainable is that, unsustainable means it will come to an end. And so the main idea I had for world peace as possible was that simple idea that we should advocate for um, different ways of reaching across, um, you know, uh, geographic and national cultural boundaries, and just try to find a solution and go straight for that to, really get away from the the policy and government as it is, but to go straight to the people. And that's the power of the internet now. And it's really tied to this idea that we live in a time that is in transition, that new social structures are possible that were not possible before, that the idea of having like a direct democracy is now more practical than it was when we set up the uh, you know election process and system of representatives um, that we had to put in place during the forming governments and the founding of the United States and democracies around the world. Representative democracy was the only way, because how are you going to get everybody to vote on things on a regular basis? Um, but that's just one example of something that is possible now that wasn't possible before. Oh, maybe it was possible before too, um, but just much more difficult. Um, and so it's easy to look back on things and with regret and to wish that you had followed different paths and pursued ideas, and that's why I'm here now, because I'm trying to take a first step, a second step, a third step, and just continue on progressing toward realizing, the vision that I have in my mind, and, with each step to make it a reality. So, I really kind of, I've really become fixated on solving climate change because there's a window in our history, in our time on this planet, and in my life, in this century, we have a window of time to move the needle and to make an impact that will have big impacts on the future. Um, and so, if there's anything that we're going to pour all of our energy into, I really think that um, it's something that is achievable, and that in the process of solving this problem, we will learn to work together to solve other problems and just learn how to work together more effectively around the world. Um, there's a lot of negativity surrounding the idea of, intergovernmental cooperation and the idea that, there's some people who I have interacted with on the internet who aren't really concerned with, the New World Order, the United Nations, Club of Rome, all that elite people trying to create, uh, instead of creating an enemy, to create emergency, to rally people around and to create these policies, then to restrict people's freedoms and have a more government control in people's lives. And it's not that those concerns are totally baseless, um, but I mean, from my understanding of, the scientific principles around global warming, climate change, I mean, it's happening. It's possible that people in the 70s, that the oil industry, they knew that this was happening, and they thought it's not a big deal, or that it won't affect them personally. And they, perhaps in the propaganda of trying, on the one side, trying to tell people it's not happening, but then also appealing to the people who do understand, it is happening, understand the science, to actually actively try to make it worse. They if there was an elite group of people that um, wanted to rally people together around a world emergency, I mean, there's no better way than to like actually create a world emergency, or do nothing to prevent it, and insulate yourself from the consequences of it, and force everybody else to deal with all this uh, all this collateral damage, and you know and then think on how you can manipulate that situation to your advantage. So, I don't think in any way the idea that elite people could benefit from this in any way means that it's not a reality. It just means that we need to solve it for ourselves, and, work together. That's the only way. And the thing that I found so encouraging is that the same people who completely dismiss this reality, um, so many of them really want a lot of the same things to happen, just for different reasons. You know, I had lots of really great conversations with people about regenerative agriculture and homesteading and forming more self-sufficient, self-reliant communities. And, those are all solutions to many more problems than just climate change. They're real solutions. Um, so, so what I really wanted to talk about were other more cool technological solutions that I think could pan out. And yeah, I need to figure out how to edit videos better and chop things up. And so I think a lot of what I will be posting here will be like a repository of these sort of streams. And I'll probably create another channel where I edit things to try not to lose people and and try to, continue to improve my delivery of information. To think about my backdrop, I'm in a hotel because I'm working out of town, and this is a good opportunity for me to try to do something productive in my free time. And I've kind of failed to sit and write something that has reach or is meaningful. I mean, I have sat and written things many, many times. I have lots of documents that I've created to outline um, business ideas and plans on how to structure um, projects that layer renewable energy and regenerative agriculture and also nest other businesses within one location to share a footprint so that to create these symbiotic relationships of different industries and activities that um, you know that reduce the cost and the inputs for each one, and then you know with the symbiotic relationships, they say the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I love that expression. That was Aristotle, or if that's not accurate, I like that expression. And so so different technological solutions. So it may seem sort of far out, but there's a lot of interest in high voltage DC cables that bring power very long distances with low loss. Um, there's an idea to build a cable um, to install an undersea cable from Australia to Singapore, and to bring, a lot of power from the desert, if you would call it, from the out, just one of the best solar locations in the world in Australia, and bring it up to Singapore. Um, is that necessarily best or the only way to do it? It's possible to have floating wind and solar, and for Singapore to build their own infrastructure of floating wind and solar, and I'm sure that there's a lot of space that they could use in their region without an undersea cable. But it's a very exciting idea that we can, increase the interconnectedness across different parts of the world, different cultures, economies, that, the more interconnected our economy is, then the less incentive there is to have conflict with one another because your neighbor's well-being is your own well-being. That you create the mutual benefit of good relations that, for the most part, we've seen in the success of the European Union and other regional trade groups. And so, yeah, I wanted to write a whole piece about um, the formation of the European Union and just this. It started with the European coal and steel community, um, that they, after World War II, tried to create these trade agreements that eliminated tariffs and tried to break down the barriers between trading across different governments, so that it would really reduce the incentive to go to war with your neighbor because your economies are linked together. And I remember seeing something that was like a Gantt chart that was like showing the formation of the European Union and all the different phases of economic integration that kind of started around the time of the European coal and steel community. Um, and that it was really significant that it was coal and steel because those were like the main uh, inputs that are needed to drive, a flourishing industrial economy, or for the purposes of war, that if you have um, an interdependence on your neighbors for the inputs needed for conflict, then it's really going to um, reduce, any motivation to have conflict with your neighbors. And so I think I think that this should be a pretty major part of our discussion. I wish that there was more interconnectedness between um, the United States and Canada and Mexico, and further through the Americas, Central and South America. So, cool technological solution that um, is not my idea. I heard this on another podcast, that um, the idea is to build a Arctic HVDC ring around the pole, the North Pole, and that we can create a global energy grid. And I think that that would be very cool because if you then had branches that went down toward the equator, um, then on the on the western hemisphere, the eastern hemisphere, like on the different sides of the planet, it will always be sunny somewhere. And so if we're interconnecting our grids, um, laterally and then also vertically, then we can actually have a base load of power from solar that is always available, at least to some base load amount, which will always be necessary to have energy storage using renewable energy. But there are many ways to reduce the number of batteries that we need and to structure it in a way that's just more, more efficient. It may be debatable the cost analysis of the HVDC. Um, at least now it's very expensive. Um, but I really think that, our material sciences and manufacturing and just broadly speaking, I really think that um, costs and quality, it'll all continue to improve. And I also think that we'll continue to move toward abundance in energy, that the cost of new energy is going to continue to plummet. So, and it may be more expensive to build these long, cables, but maybe the impact of sourcing the materials for the cable is less than the impact of sourcing the materials for 10 times the amount of energy storage that we would have needed without it. And so, you know, the supply and demand factors in economic choices are not reflecting the externalities, the impact to the environment and the society. And so it it would be great to find a way to price the externalities. Um, and there are times when we decide to do something that's much more expensive than another option, and that we we do it for other reasons, maybe national security or, a sense of ethics. Mm. So, so yeah, I really think that it's just flat out wrong to think purely in the terms of cost. At least there needs to be some aspect of society that is thinking in terms of, the true intrinsic value of things on a holistic level and to find where, you know, the cost analysis of things is out of line with how we value the other things that we value in the world. And so if we had a an HVDC ring, that maybe went from part of Canada over to Iceland, and then from Iceland, you know, to Greenland, to Ireland, to the UK, and then all interconnected into a European grid that went to Russia and all the way around back to Alaska, and then you know went down the coast to California and down to Mexico. Um, and it could continue going south and all the way to the tip of Argentina. And and then on the other side we have branches that go down the coast of Europe and into Africa, and yeah, all the way down to South Africa and India and this. this undersea HVDC cable to Singapore from Australia, and to link all that together, China and India, that one world electric grid. Um, there's an idea that is popular in India that's advocating for this idea of broadening the connections on the electrical grid. And I think that this it, it's difficult to see how powerful it would be. Um, it's way more powerful than just meaning we would need fewer batteries, but it's also it would also be you know, like I just said, just reducing any incentive to have conflict with your neighbor, um, because it could really create barriers in your existence that you're all interdependent on each other in your energy grid, and you just got to learn how to live and work together. On just a foundational level, that we're going to, cooperate on having energy, and that would just be so powerful. I mean, it's so difficult, even like in the United States, Texas refuses to join their grid to the broader, I believe there are three separate grids from like kind of the East Coast and the West Coast and then Texas. It kind of actually I need to look into where it splits, but I believe there are like kind of three main grids in the United States that operate independent from one another. And so there's a lot of discussion of the benefits of interconnecting these grids and creating interconnections within them. Um, to take like, to make it kind of like if you imagine like a spider web, and instead of just having it radiate out like the spokes on a wheel to create all these cross connections, um, it really reduces congestion on the grid and allows a more even distribution of the power. So, your wind and solar that's um, decentralized and distributed is just able to get to where it's most useful um, in a more direct path. And yeah, so be super, super, super powerful. And you know, I think that we should try to decouple um, some of just the foundation of society. I think we should decouple it from, uh, you know, like federal government levels. Just seems that, um, well, having a decentralized energy system, having a decentralized financial system, these things could be, like aspects of a world. I don't want to say it's a decentralized social structure uh, that I mean, it's not to say that there won't be any decision making or influence from governments, but what I'm trying to say is that like let's imagine in the times in history when we used gold as a foundation of currency. Um, nobody's like printing gold. or controlling the supply of gold. I know that there have been times when there's standards put in place, and there have been there have there have been pretty centralized systems in managing gold, but the truth is that you could find it in the world. It exists, and you know who where the gold came from uh, was not anything to do with the government. And so, in the same sense, electricity, the principles that we've discovered through science, um, energy and value exist in the world, and it's possible to create um, a system where people in different parts of the world can interact on an even playing field without a sort of construed system that has been manipulated to benefit one group over another. Uh, it's not to say that it'll always be better, because there's times when rigging the system benefits people, and if you can't rig the system, you're beholden to the facts of life and the true nature of scarcity, and you cannot just you know print money to get your way out of it. So, yeah, I mean, I see these things as very, very interconnected, that, energy and currency just are connected. And so yeah, as we move toward a decentralized financial system, we're going to also be moving toward a decentralized energy grid. But, the more resistance we put to it, to prevent these interconnections across the grid, I really think that the only way to interpret that is a commitment to conflict. Um, and so there might be like a 1% that wants to uh, commit us to conflict because they benefit from it. But I think that the 99% of us should see it clearly, and that the more we integrate, um, just the just the foundation. We don't need to integrate every single thing, and I really believe in having different approaches to life, different approaches to social structures. I believe in freedom, and so this is totally different than like a one world government, where we all have to follow the same set of guidelines. If you want to move to a different place that does things differently, then you can do that. Um, or if you want to uh, enter into politics or get into becoming an active member of your uh, society, you can try to get in, run for town council or whatever, and try to change your local area. Um, because I think it's important for people to be able to govern themselves and however ways they decide to organize themselves, and that we should embrace existing systems and try to work within existing systems, um, while at the same time just building new systems. And this can all happen together in parallel. That Yeah. So it's really like this is just at the foundation of the ecosystem. the economy, that the foundation is energy. And I've thought this a lot that um, people think of economics as a science. Um, and there's, a lot of debate. And other people say it's, kind of like a social science. It's like almost like psychology or human behavior is just much more subjective and something that's in flux and more difficult to come up with sort of fixed, laws of behavior or something. But I think that the at least I think that there's kind of like a tree of knowledge, a tree of um, science of how logic unfolds that obviously like well, philosophy is the mother science, and then other schools of thought are sort of built upon the more fundamental um, you know areas of study, that math is maybe like the most fundamental sort of in parallel with philosophy uh, and physics, and that chemistry, um, biology, uh, psychology, all these things are sort of built on top of each other, uh, but it it goes down to this more fundamental level, and so economics does not exist kind of in a vacuum, but economics is more derived from ecology, in my opinion. Um, it's about r the exchange of resources, the allocation of resources, the decisions of individuals on how to um, sustain their life. It's all about a subsistence method. There's there's things that are a necessity and there's things that are luxury items, and there, as you get more into, like non-essentials, that's a different aspect of economics from maybe the more like uh, macro scale. But at the foundation of economics is energy and resources. That there's some essential commodities that are like a part of our subsistence method, and it's all tied into a living world. And so there's an economics to any natural system in the food chain and the web of life. They are, we might feel like it's all, matters of preference and choice, but to a large degree, that people are kind of forced into many decisions just based on what's available. And, generally speaking, people choose to feed and house themselves in the most cost-effective ways. That's based on um, what your environment provides for you. Um, and so, yeah, we live in a globalized world that it's not as apparent how our environment is, providing what we need to survive. it's not as apparent because it comes from, far away and through many changes hands many times and but if, you know, if the world's ecologies collapse, then uh, the economy collapses for sure. So, so I think that, that's a good sort of lens to view economics through, and it can help kind of steer people toward thinking on uh, how to design an economy to emulate ecology. And like I think a lot about having a colony on the moon or Mars or in orbit, or even having independent nation states pop up in international waters. The world is two-thirds ocean, and there's um, nations that are falling. The sea will rise, and so I saw some great things. It's very unfortunate what's happening to the Maldives and other nations that are below sea level. Um, I was very encouraged to see that the Maldives is um, making plans to build these like floating structures that um, they wanted to make this like really amazing community of where people can live and thrive and be a member of the world community and not have to go leave their uh, their whole history, their heritage behind and integrate into another society. Like, appears likely that there will be mass migration to move out of areas that are adversely affected from climate change and global warming. So I think the idea of having, floating ocean communities is exciting. And the idea that a place like the Maldives could do that and stay in that location, kind of be anchored to their existing land. And, you know, I live near Chicago, and I find it so inspiring that after the Chicago fire, which there's a lot of, conspiracy theories about this, but they had problems trying to build in the in the land around the Great Lakes. Chicago was like a marshy area, kind of boggy, marshy area. And so when they tried to build up, things were sinking and settling, and they couldn't build beyond a certain point. And what they did after the Chicago fire is they elevated uh, ground level about 10 feet, and they I couldn't tell you all the details on how they did this, but I believe they drove piles down into the ground. I mean, they built they built it up, and they built a whole ground level 10 feet up. So when I went, would go to visit my grandmother, and when I go through working through the city, there's lots and lots of neighborhoods that have yards that are below street level where it was 100 years ago or whatever. When was the Chicago fire? I'm kind of not remembering. But yeah, and my dad said growing up there, there's these like little underground tunnels and stuff under the city. There's these little like crawl spaces and alleys that are part of the old city that they built up on top of. And, they used to do all sorts of stuff as young hooligans. So it's just that people could do something like that 100 years ago or whatever. Um, I think it was more. I think it was kind of the end of the 1800s. I could have this very wrong, but I know there are pictures and stuff. So there's, but they had jacks. They would jack up, like a house jack, and they actually like elevated entire buildings. Like they didn't just build up. There were like some structures that they actually lifted like 10 feet up. And this was a long time ago. Um, and God knows who built how they built the pyramids, but just imagining, the great things that people have accomplished in history, and they did it just through determination and ingenuity. Um, you know, every time they came to a problem, they solved the problem and they just kept at it. Um, I'm sure it's, very good people can solve problems. And just seems like people despair over climate change and many of the world's problems. And it's just thinking like, what are we gonna do? And I mean, there are some things you can't change. There are some other things you can change. And we can still do great things. And it doesn't have to cost, a billion, trillions of dollars. It doesn't have to come from, a centralized government. It can come from individuals and communities coming together and uh, and just putting in the work. Um, so yeah, I've also found Earth ships incredibly inspiring. If you uh, if you ever check out the Earth Ship Academy in Taos, New Mexico, very cool place. Someday I'd like to go to their school and go through their whole program, and then Earth ships have been a part of my, dream for myself and for the future to have a homestead with my family and have this, very self-sufficient and this like permanent structure that, for generations, long after I'm gone and my children decide to go live wherever they want, 100, 200, 300 years from now, you're creating a structure that, you know, is likely to be, pretty pretty durable, built into the earth. And I just like to see your typical, uh, timber framed house last 100 years. I live in a 100-year-old house, and it's actually doing fairly well. But I can't imagine it 200 years from now. But but yeah, I mean, the way they build an Earth ship, at least the bones of it are, you know, able to withstand a lot of time and uh, extreme conditions. So I think that the principles and ideas that go into how you would design something like the Earth ships, um, using waste, using recycling materials that would otherwise be going to a landfill. We don't have a great solution for what to do with tires and many other materials going into landfills. And while I feel like this could be a controversial thing to say, to take garbage and to build up in parts of the world with uh, sea level encroachment. But I mean, it's like, killing two birds with one stone. And, if, I mean, they could say that, you know, pay us to take the garbage. If you want to get rid of your tires, uh, we'll take them at a price. And so you don't need to be burning them and polluting the world and the air and your area, because there's parts of the world they're burning tires, and there's there's a lot of cost in shredding the tire, and you're not really like upcycling it very well, it, because it's like downcycling. Um, so I mean, I just think that, yeah, I mean, there might be ways to and yeah, of course you got to do like your due diligence. Like there's been a lot of concern that of off gassing from tires into a into a dwelling, um, kind of uh, breaks the whole idea. Um, but I've seen, it seems that what I've seen is that it's UV light mainly breaks down the tires and causes the off gassing. And so if you fully embed a tire in a dwelling, it kind of locks that material up, and um it doesn't off gas. But if you still had concerns, you could put like moisture barriers and put other barriers between the dwelling place and the wall structure. Um, and I suppose it's possible that if you were to try to build up in places that are losing land to sea level rise, that by building up with reclaimed materials like tires and so on, um, that there's the potential to be polluting the water, polluting the land. So it's not to like overlook that, and there may be ways to mitigate that. Um, it's, I think we should look at uh, different recipes for concrete, or I've heard discussion of geopolymers that are more like the ancient Roman or perhaps the Egyptian recipe for concrete. Um, it's much more durable, and yeah, I mean, uh, the way the Earthship Academy packs dirt into tires, um, is very labor intensive. And I feel like it's possible to maybe design some tools and some equipment that can expedite that process, so that you could build up quite a bit with you got to pack the tire full of dirt, you pack it full of other materials. They put like cardboard and stuff too. But I feel like a small group of people could test out some ways of doing this and build at least some kind of structure, and maybe then you encase that in concrete and form some structures that would be very durable. Um, and in that way, then just build up as the sea rises. Um, yeah, and you could even have like corridors where you build up, and that there is, you're making a grid of a city block, and then you could have like, you know, streets, and you could have canals, and you could have a very interesting uh, living space that you plan where you could dig down to let the water in, and dredge out an area that you want to build a waterway through as the water rises anyways. And I don't know, just kind of bouncing some ideas out there, but it seems that you know what the Maldives have planned is just one example of this, but um, and then sort of on the flip side, there's the trend of billionaires or whatever buying yachts, and just what it is for people to sort of get out into international waters and to be an international world citizen that you know um, it seems that for corporations and the extremely wealthy, they have their reasons for wanting to be not tied to any one jurisdiction. Um, and it's been a long dream of many people on the fringe to have a community that's just on its own jurisdiction. And so it seems that well, it's almost like I've got a friend who does these van conversions. People want to live in the van life, and it's almost like that is progression from there's the Chris McCandless kind of people who like in Into the Wild just want to be free and um, don't want to live their life within the structure of the 9 to 5 and have a house and a mortgage and all this stuff. Like the tiny home community and others that are looking for other ways to live that is not uh, within the parameters that we're kind of raised in our culture to think that these are like this is what a good and successful life is. Um, you know, it's kind of like um, so. Anyways, I've seen some really cool things with people building sailboats that are kind of like these van life conversions and having electric motors and solar on the sailboat. So, you sail around when it's good. You don't need to drain your battery, but you've also got a transform. You've got an inverter, and you've got whatever you need to just live your life. It's a relatively modern life with and now you can have electricity. You get the Starlink internet connection, and you can go anywhere in the world and have basic amenities. And so just the idea that on on the elite side there you got the mega yacht kind of community, and then on just the um, on the most accessible side of people with the most limited choices, you could you could actually attain the same level of freedom, just because, yeah, the access to technology has just grown to that level. Um, yeah, it seems almost too good to be true. Um, and I feel like it's going to continue to progress. We're, going to continue to have these sort of two steps forward, one step back. Um, as long as we continue um, to build on what we're learning, every time we have a contraction for whatever reason, we hit hard times. I think that, hard times actually push people out the door to make change. And so that's kind of how we make progress. People get kind of comfortable and sort of set in their ways. Things kind of stagnate, and and then problems. But yeah, just how cool would it be if we kind of build like something like the middle class of free zones around the world, and I'm sure there's different regions of the world that we can form more independent communities that are just more self-reliant, and in international waters and floating cities, floating wind and solar is going to be huge. Um, and yeah, and SpaceX bought that oil platform. It's a floating oil platform. And the idea of having spaceports out in open water, having farms that huge, vast marine agriculture is possible. The open ocean is largely open, and so you definitely need to do environmental assessments, but we could reduce our footprint on the land and agriculture and industry, mining and everything if we carefully went about trying to build infrastructure out in the open ocean. And as we do, increase our capabilities, it'll create a whole nother dimension of space, human habitation on the Earth. And um, it's possible. You got vast wind and solar resources out at sea, and you could be desalinating water. Um, and what I think would be super cool is if we used electrolysis to make hydrogen, and in the process of doing that, we're then um, processing the seawater. And I need to look into some of the science of electrolysis on, I know you need like an electrolyte in the water to help the electricity um, break the oxygen hydrogen bond for the water to, be conductive. But, you know, I believe that just straight seawater is not ideal. And so there may be like, layers to this that, you might desalinate it, but not to a quality that is good for like fresh drinking water, but just you get it kind of to a point where it's within an acceptable parameter for electrolysis to make hydrogen. But then, if you take the hydrogen and you could make green ammonia, you can make all these other products from it. You could I know SpaceX uses the methanol rockets, but I mean, you could use your hydrogen as a feedstock to make, uh, or is it methalox is what they call it. But, to make methane from the hydrogen and pull carbon out of the air. Um, but then if we were to also have hydrogen fuel cells or fuel cells that used ammonia, um, the byproduct is water. So it may be that you desalinate the water to a point it can be electrolyzed. And now you have a consumable product of hydrogen or that you could have a value added chain, but then you can also, as you consume it in a fuel cell or combustion turbine, very carefully close the loop and capture the water off of that. And now, in the process of consuming the hydrogen, you you have a byproduct of pure water, and so you never needed to desalinate the water through like reverse osmosis to that level of quality. And then if you got communities out, and this doesn't have to be in the open ocean, this could be just anywhere along the coast by seawater, and then I'm not really sure if water that's been produced through fuel cell or combustion, it's still kind of going through an industrial process, and uh, there may be a way to just have it be ready to be fresh, pure drinking water. Um, I believe I've seen that people do demonstrations where their fuel cells produces water and they just drink it to demonstrate that. But we should I think we should focus in on like, capturing rainwater and this and that for fresh drinking water. Um, but that it could feed into um, efficient ways of using water in agriculture. Um, Agrivoltaics, growing food under solar panels. There's a lot less evaporation because of the shade from the solar. And the plant, many plants, perennial plants especially, do very well, even with just the amount of shade that a solar array creates. And the biggest impact is, this uh, cooler climate without direct sunlight retains moisture. And, plants need water, sunlight, soil, and nutrients. And if you can have a lot of scarcity in some of those things, but if you don't have water, it's not gonna grow. Um, so I mean, if you have good amount of sunlight or decent, even ambient light, some plants do just fine, and they're totally happy and even thriving compared to how full sunlight would be for those plants. So the impact of having more water available is huge. Um, and even the cooler climate just doesn't stress the plants as much. And so if we're able to design systems that really look at the full cycle of inputs of energy and water, the footprint of the land, um, and then even the whole supply chain of producing something and consuming it, and then the byproduct from consuming it, uh, what could be a waste product instead feeds into another process. And so you try to create, what they're calling circular economies that are um, that are not going to be based on scarcity. This is how nature works. It creates, limitless growth potential. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, world peace is possible. And we can solve climate change. Even if climate change, global warming continues to get worse, and it gets worse than the projections, if we can be resilient to that change and develop methods to remove carbon from the atmosphere, um, in the form of methane and CO2, and we develop, abundant clean energy, then, we might get to the end of the century and miss the mark, but we can be standing on solid ground and we can make a choice on what we want the next century to look like. And, you know, put ourselves in a very different position than just being at the mercy of a different world with, a climate that just humanity has never lived in its entire history. So it's it's going to be interesting. And yeah, I mean, seems that the only way forward is forward. If people try to put their heads in the sand, say it's not happening, try to say there's nothing we can do about it, um, then I'm sure that it seems that there's a great majority that are in that position now. Um, but it's always been a small group of people with the right ideas that made anything happen. And just once the benefit is apparent, once you really got something good, then everybody gets on board. Um, so yeah, I'd like to continue to try to articulate these ideas. There's some things that I wanted to mention in the global HVDC grid that you know if you had a branch go down to connect Europe to Africa, so there's been a lot of ideas on doing that. It's like a was it there's this massive project they want to build in the desert. It's been in the works for a long time to connect with the HVDC grid. Um, what I would love to see is the principles that we're learning about agrivoltaics applied to um, another project that's called the Great Green Wall. They're applying all these permaculture principles to um, plants, trees, and perennial plants, and to install swales and other water collection um, structures, which India has a remarkable progress in this to improve watersheds. But we could really change the landscape. And I mean, it's a subject that you could debate from many different angles. If you know you if you're gonna completely remake a landscape, you're gonna have some good effects and you're gonna have some adverse effects. It's gonna affect different different communities, different species, and ecosystems differently. And it's not possible to have zero impact on the environment. Um, but we can make a choice on what impacts, and then, how closely we look at that. And so, the idea behind the Great Green Wall is to slow, stop, and reverse the process of desertification. And, the Sahara Desert is growing, and people are losing, some arable land and historical, their heritage of where their communities lived, um, to the desert. And so, I mean, if it's like if you want to restore the land, do you want to restore it to the exact condition that it was in the past? And then how far into the past? Because, choices people made 100 years ago form the basis of what people lived in today. And so that may be different than the way the land was 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago. And, it just gets bigger and bigger. From what I've heard, I think it was, gosh, I don't know, it was, 10,000, 20, it was many tens of thousands of years ago, maybe, or more, that the Sahara Desert was, you know, lush grasslands. Um, it was like a savanna. And they know this from finding people lived in the Sahara when it was full of different animals and totally different climate. So there's all these, you know, all this artwork that people have made to depict plants and animals from when they lived there. We find other evidence for this, and there's, vast water resources from the, uh, you know, millennia of rain that did fall and get into aquifers. So, um, it's another one of these things where you create this system of mutual benefits and symbiotic relationships, and you get so much more bang for your buck. And the return on investment is just it's more than the dollar amount. Um, like you really can't put a price on something being beautiful. You can't put a price on hearing birds chirp in the morning. Um, you know, if i- if we can form a world community that just goes to solutions, that'd be great. But yeah, for all the people in different parts of the world where they live, um, it's accessible for them to 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 take these solutions, and it's so powerful how wind and solar has become cost competitive because there's a necessity. You must spend money on energy. And so if places are sort of going to invest in infrastructure, they can make choices, small choices on just how you structure it, you know, in, while you're doing the groundworks to install your solar array, maybe just throw in a swale somewhere. plant some perennial plants, throw down have some intentions with the species of grasses that you introduce, uh, graze sheep and integrate plants and animal communities within and between solar arrays, and then have agroforestry projects that then interconnect throughout this. And I mean, literally reverse the process of desertification. I mean, how far could you take that? Could you just keep moving north and just, and that's where the debate on the impact on the land just really gets interesting. That, there's so many species that live in the desert, and it's its own ecosystem that um, has its own intrinsic value to itself. And, for us as, you know, members of life on Earth, that I want to protect the scorpions and the snakes and the lizards and the little beetles and stuff. They have their own intrinsic value, and so it's not like we should just take anything that doesn't fit with us being comfortable and just make the whole desert, just try to go back to those 40,000 years ago or whatever when it was all grasslands, and turn the whole world into one big farm or something. That's not, it's not how I would see it unfolding, um, but yeah, it's not going to take that much to get us everything that we need. I mean, from what I've heard, we need about 1% of the farmland. I believe the statistic I heard is that in the United States, we can get all the power we need from solar power using only 1% of current farmland. And so that just seems like a no-brainer. Um, Maybe I have that statistic a little off, but I feel like we're going to end up using a lot less than that. And then there's all these other forms of energy that are going to be helping as well. So, it's almost like, we should start really thinking about, you know, it's it's not just like all cost. People think too much on the difficulty of integrating renewables and the cost. But we're building infrastructure that's going to be here for decades. And so every time we build it, it's an opportunity to have a very lasting impact on an area. And we should think of all the benefits that we can integrate inside each project so that, you know, if you spread that 1% out and make each one a little oasis of uh, ecology, um, be a little nucleus to a larger interconnected system, ecological land management, and sort of permaculture, in industrial permaculture. You know, it's just such incredible potential. So, yeah.